That's a hard question. That is a real hard question. One has to do with the heart of constitutional and human rights questions in most societies, and the other one has to do with a philosophical view of how you build a civilization. These things have been written about for centuries, Madam Speaker. And that's a very hard question. I want to say something. The Japanese have a whistleblower legislation that they passed in 2004. And you know how they describe the objective of that legislation? I read just a little part of it. The purpose of this legislation is to contribute to the stabilization and general welfare of the life of every citizen. It is the same thing, you know, to do with whistleblowing. And it is strong in this legislation about people having the right to do the right thing when something is wrong. But their conception of what this thing is meant to be is far, in my view, Madam Speaker, and I'm sure in yours, significantly superior in vision, in sensibility, in a sense of ethos about the society itself. And I think that those are the elements of the bill, I think, that trouble me. Another issue that it raises, therefore, in that context, is what level and dimension of citizenship does it require for responsible practice of whistleblowing? Because I said two of the issues was it doesn't protect the whistleblower well enough, but the second issue is that it can create the condition in which everybody is news carrying about everybody. And you can have a problem. What is the level of citizenship responsibility that you need, and how do you cultivate that? How do you help that? And I want to start with the original issue that I raised, drawing on what my friend from Moruga Tableland said, which is that dissonance between what you say and what you do, the leadership by example question, being critical in this regard, because citizenship behavior is a response to either the evolving nature of leadership by example at the top, or deteriorating nature of leadership by example at the top. That is what characterizes citizenship behavior. So, one of the early points I made was that I had a problem with state jurisdiction over private sector industries. And I do have a problem with that, Madam Speaker. Because you see, the state is larger and the state owns a significant proportion of the industries in this country. Perhaps getting a little smaller now, I don't know, because as industries are divested, you are also creating more state enterprises. So it may well be growing. But if you bring whistleblowing having to do with private sector institutions under the control of the 21 government agencies identified here, Madam Speaker, I think you are drawing the private sector into a domain. I don't know if they would wish to go there. And secondly, I don't know what the implications are for government exercise of control over those private institutions. Because you see, many of the institutions we create are meant to be independent in name, Madam Speaker, and to be also independent in reality. But the temptation is such, because of the political process and constitutional power in our country, that many of those institutions which are meant to be independent can be politicized by the process of appointments and by other things. That then creates a situation in your society we are bringing the private sector under this ambit now can create a double jeopardy problem. And I want to warn against it. I don't think it's healthy for our society. I am against this kind of state expansion of control in any society. But in a little country like Trinidad and Tobago, 1.4 million, maybe more now with the migration and so on, and will increase. But it's still a small society. As bad as things might be, or seem to us sometimes, we still manage to govern pretty well. There is still a fear. There is, yes, a lot of interdependence, but there is a fair sectoral sense of independence between government on the one hand, private sector on the other. And we've had a creeping situation here, Madam Speaker, which we need to acknowledge. We had legislation that we passed here that brought the entire NGO sector under state control. A governance system which allows for effective individual scrutiny of every civil society institution in the society. I am not against the scrutiny. I am against a situation in which government, being a principal funder of many of these civil society institutions, now have really executive power over many of these institutions on the basis of demand for certain accountability. So that's that. So you bring your NGO. How is a society organized by and large? You have your mass of citizens, but you have government. You have the private sector involved in various business at different levels. You have your civil society sector. And you have the public sector serving under the governance arrangement of the government in power. Now, when you bring more and more institutions, more and more sectors of society under governmental scrutiny of this type, you're really creating a society that you do not want, Madam Speaker. I mean, today, you might be the government, today somebody else might be the government. But one day, some crazy person might be in government. And, Madam Speaker, it has happened in countries that never expected that that would happen to them. And if that's why you have to make laws which recognize certain restraints, which recognize the limits of reach, which recognize the curbs that you need to have inherently on power within the society of those least able to manage it. And therefore, I want to say, Madam Speaker, that this is a matter that I'm concerned about. I really do not feel, you know, if BP wants to organize its own entity to manage whistleblowing, fine, I have no problem with that. If a state enterprise wants to have its own entity to manage whistleblowing, I have no problem with that. If ANSA MACAL wants to have its own whistleblowing authority, but to have all the private sector institutions also contained in a situation where these individual institutions, a person can write to these institutions and bring them under government scrutiny by whatever process. You may argue that it's independent institutions or they're arm's length or whatever. Now, there are some that are justified, like the SEC issue. There are yet others that you can justify. But my own feeling is that you have to be very cautious about what you justify and how much you bring into it. I have a document here which I just want to share a few lines from.